22 years. That's how long the Harlow Bridge case had been sitting in a drawer at the Georgia Court of Appeals, filed under closed. No remedy. The senior partners at Whitmore Gallagher were celebrating its anniversary with champagne when a young black woman in the back row raised her hand and said the case wasn't closed. It was wrong. The hand stayed up. The room went quiet in the specific way rooms go quiet when something is about to change and nobody wants to be the first person to admit it. Her name was Sasha Drummond. She was 24 years old. She had been at Whitmore Gallagher for 11 months, hired through the firm's diversity initiative, assigned a desk near the supply closet on the 4th floor, and had not, until this moment, spoken at a senior partners meeting without being called on first. Senior partner Richard Colby set down his champagne flute very carefully on the conference table. He was 61. He had argued before the Supreme Court 4 times. His portrait hung in the lobby next to the firm's founding partners. He looked at Sasha the way a man looks at a parking ticket he finds on his windshield in the rain. Not angry yet, just waiting to decide whether to be. "I'm sorry, Miss Drummond. Did you say the Harlow ruling was wrong?" "I said the Harlow ruling was wrongly decided. Yes, sir." Colby picked up his champagne flute again. He took a slow sip. Around the table, 7 other senior partners did not move. The associate attorneys along the wall, 12 of them, most of them young, most of them there to watch and learn, held their breath as a group. "Fascinating," Colby said. "And which part of the Georgia Court of Appeals' 22-year precedent would you like to explain to us today?" He smiled. He turned to the partner beside him, a woman named Margaret Foss, and the two of them shared the small, private smile of people who have never once been wrong in a room and have no reason to think today will be different. Sasha stood up. She did not look at the smile. She looked at the projection screen behind Colby's left shoulder, where a slide read, "Harlow Vol. State of Gredia, 2020 W's of established present." "The suppressed testimony," Sasha said. "The Harlow ruling stands on the premise that no exculpatory evidence existed at the time of conviction. That premise is false. The evidence existed. It was filed. It was misfiled under the wrong defendant number and buried in the Fulton County Archive System in 1994. It has been there for 22 years. It was never destroyed. It was never reviewed. It has a case stamp and a receiving clerk's signature." She paused. "I found it last Thursday." The room did not inhale. The room forgot how. Colby's smile did not disappear. It changed shape. It got smaller, colder, the smile of a man making a calculation. "Miss Drummond." His voice was patient in the way a teacher's voice is patient with a child who has given a wrong answer confidently. "Our firm has built a significant portion of its appellate practice on the Harlow precedent. The Georgia AG's office has cited it in 47 subsequent cases. The state legislature used it as a framework for the 2008 Evidence Reform Act. Whatever you think you found in a county archive last Thursday." "I can show you the stamp," Sasha said. "I have it here." She opened the folder in front of her. She slid a photograph down the table toward Colby. It traveled past Margaret Foss, past 2 other senior partners, past a water pitcher, and stopped in front of Richard Colby. He looked at it. He did not pick it up. "Anyone can produce a document," he said. "That's not the issue." "Then what's the issue, sir?" The room shifted. Colby looked at her with something new in his expression, not yet anger, not yet alarm, just a sharpening, the look of a man recalculating. "The issue," he said, "is that a 24-year-old associate on her first year of review has just walked into a senior partners meeting and told 8 people with a combined 190 years of legal experience that they have been building on a foundation she found a crack in last Thursday in a county archive by herself." He let the sentence sit. "Yes," Sasha said, "that's exactly what happened." Margaret Foss leaned forward. "Richard, perhaps we should at least—" "I am speaking, Margaret." He turned back to Sasha. His voice was now very calm. "Where did you go to law school, Ms. Drummond?" "Georgia State." Not Emory. No, sir. Not Georgia. No, sir. I ask, Colby said, because the Harlow litigation was handled by 6 Emory-educated partners over the course of 3 years. It was peer-reviewed by 2 sitting federal judges before it was published. It has been cited by courts in 11 states. And you are suggesting that none of those people, not one, thought to check the Fulton County archive system for misfiled exhibits. I'm suggesting they had no reason to look, Sasha said, because the misfiling happened after the record was closed. The exhibit was submitted during trial. It went missing between the clerk's receiving desk and the case file. By the time the appellate record was compiled, the trial attorneys had already been told it wasn't there. They believed them. Colby stood up. He was a tall man. He used the height. He walked to the window that faced Peachtree Street and looked out for a moment, both hands in his pockets, as if he were simply checking on the weather. "Miss Drummond," he said without turning around, "I'm going to give you some advice that I give to every first-year associate who comes through this firm. The law is not a treasure hunt. It is a cathedral. People built it slowly, carefully, over centuries, and you do not walk into a cathedral with a hammer because you think you found a crack. You bring it to the architects. You show your work. You earn the right to be heard before you demand an audience." He turned around. "You have not yet earned that right." Sasha looked at him for a long moment. She looked at the photograph sitting in front of him on the table untouched. "With respect, Mr. Colby," she said, "Marcus Harlow has been in Valdosta State Prison for 22 years for a crime the suppressed evidence suggests he did not commit. I would like to know how much more time he needs to give me in order for me to earn the right to be heard." Nobody breathed. Colby's face did not change, but something behind it did. He looked at Margaret Foss, then he looked at the photograph on the table, then he looked back at Sasha Drummond, standing in front of the supply closet floor associate chair she had been assigned when nobody expected her to matter. "Show your work," he said finally, "all of it, Monday morning, 8 a.m. He picked up his champagne flute. He walked out of the conference room. 7 senior partners watched him go. Then 7 sets of eyes moved slowly to Sasha. None of them said anything. None of them offered her the chair next to theirs. She had 4 days. Sasha had found the document on a Tuesday, the way most extraordinary things are found, not by genius, but by stubbornness and bad luck at the right moment. She had been looking for something else entirely, a precedent citation for a housing discrimination brief that had nothing to do with Harlow, nothing to do with the appellate division, nothing to do with anything she was supposed to be building her career on. She had been in the Fulton County Public Records Archive because the elevator in her building was broken, and she had promised herself a coffee from the place down the street, and the archive was on the way. She had been pulling files for 40 minutes when the folder mislabeled Harlow M. Exhibit 14C, misfiled Raritz, had fallen off a shelf and landed face up at her feet. She had looked at the date. She had looked at the case number. She had sat down on the floor of the Fulton County Archive between 2 rolling shelving units and read for 3 hours. The receiving clerk's signature at the bottom of the exhibit log was dated October 3, 1994. The exhibit itself was a forensic lab report. The forensic lab report contained results that the jury in the Marcus Harlow trial had never seen. The results that the jury had never seen directly contradicted the prosecution's central theory of the case. She had called her mother from the archive parking lot. "Mama." "Sasha, it's almost 7. Did you eat?" "Mama, I need you to listen to me." Her mother, Dorothea Drummond, worked the day shift at Piedmont Hospital. She had worked the day shift at Piedmont Hospital for 19 years. She had 2 daughters, and she had raised both of them in a 2-bedroom apartment in Decatur on a nurse's salary after their father left. And she had told them both the same thing every morning before school: twice as good. Every room you walk into, twice as good. Because the room is not going to make it easy. "I'm listening," Dorothea said. I found something that changes everything in a case that everyone thinks is closed. A man has been in prison for 22 years and I know I can get him out. But the firm is going to fight me on it. The senior partners are going to fight me on it. There are 47 cases built on this precedent, and if I'm right, they all have to be reconsidered. Dorothea was quiet for a moment. Are you right? Yes, ma'am. Another pause. Then go be twice as good, Dorothea said, and call me when you're done. Sasha worked Thursday night, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. She did not sleep more than 3 hours at a stretch. She ate cereal over the kitchen sink at 2 a.m. and didn't notice. She had a yellow legal pad, a red pen, and a laptop running 3 browser windows, and she built her argument the way her father had once told her good things were built. One brick at a time, each one checked before the next one was laid. Her father had been a carpenter before he left. She had been 9. That was the only useful thing he had ever told her. By Sunday night at 11 p.m., she had 42 pages. She drove to the office at 7 a.m. Monday. She set up the conference room herself. She made the coffee herself. She printed her documents, numbered her exhibits, laid them out in order on the table. She had done this twice before in moot court in law school. Both times she had won. This was not moot court. This was not a grade. This was a man named Marcus Harlow who had spent 8,030 days in a Georgia state prison and who had never once, according to his letters to his sister in Macon, stopped believing that someone would eventually come and find what had been lost. The senior partners filed in at 8,003. Colby sat at the head of the table. Margaret Foss sat to his left. The others arranged themselves in order of seniority, a ritual Sasha had noticed months ago, and filed away without knowing why. Junior partners stood along the wall. No one offered Sasha the chair at the near end of the table. She took it anyway. Your 48 hours are up, Colby said. Show us. Sasha showed them. She started not with a document. She knew better than to start with a document. She started with the original trial. She walked them through the prosecution's theory of the case, step by step, exhibit by exhibit, using only materials that had already been admitted to the record. She gave Colby nothing to argue with, nothing to dismiss, nothing to call a treasure hunt. She spoke for 9 minutes without interruption, and when she stopped, every person at that table had a clear picture of exactly what the jury had been told, and exactly what the jury had been told, and exactly what the jury had been asked to believe. Then she put the document on the screen. Exhibit 14C, she said, submitted for the record by the defense on October 1st, 1994. Received by the clerk's office on October 3rd, 1994. Stamped, signed, and misfiled under the wrong defendant number, Harlow, M. Was filed under Haregrove, M. Was filed under Haregrove, M. Where it has remained unreviewed for 22 years. This is not a copy. It is the original. The ink is original. The stamp is original. The chain of custody is traceable. She put the forensic report on the screen beside the filing stamp. The report shows that the physical evidence used to place Marcus Harlow at the scene was cross-contaminated at the lab. The contamination was documented by the lab technician. The documentation was submitted to the defense. The defense submitted it to the court. The court never received it because it was filed under the wrong name. The room was very still. Margaret Foss spoke first. How certain are you of the chain of custody? Completely. The archive has a continuous intake log going back to 1988. I've traced this document through every entry. It never left the building. It was never altered. It was simply never found. And the lab technician? Retired. Living in Savannah. I spoke with her on Saturday. She remembers the case. She remembers submitting the report. She assumed it had been received. Sasha paused. She cried when I told her it hadn't. Foss said back. One of the other senior partners, a man named Leonard Crow, who had not spoken in any meeting Sasha had ever attended, leaned forward. If this holds? It holds, Sasha said. Crow looked at Colby. Colby was looking at the screen. Richard, Foss said quietly, We need to call the Georgia Innocence Project." Colby said nothing. "Richard." Foss's voice was not soft anymore. "There is a man in a state prison. Whatever our precedent exposure is, whatever the AG's office is going to say, whatever 47 subsequent cases have to be reconsidered, there is a man in a state prison, and this document means he should not be there." Colby looked at the document on the screen for a long time. He looked at Sasha. "How did you find this?" he said. "Of all the things in all the archives." "The file fell off a shelf," Sasha said. Colby made a sound that was almost a laugh. It came out wrong, hollow, like a sound a man makes when something he has carried for a long time suddenly gets heavier. "It fell off a shelf," he repeated. "Yes, sir." He looked at her for another moment. "Your argument is tight," he said. "Your documentation is thorough." He paused. "This is going to be a very hard week for this firm." "I know," Sasha said. "And a significantly harder week for Marcus Harlow if we do nothing." "Yes, sir. It will be his 8,031st day." Colby nodded once. He picked up his phone. He dialed his assistant. "Get me James Whitfield at the Georgia Innocence Project. Today, before noon." He set the phone down. He looked around the table. "And get someone to pull all 47 Harlow citations. We are going to need to know exactly what we're walking into before the press does." He pushed his chair back and stood. He did not look at the champagne glasses still sitting on the sideboard from Friday's celebration, but every other person in the room did. The Georgia Innocence Project moved fast when it moved. James Whitfield, its executive director, had been doing this work for 16 years, and he had the particular economy of motion that came from having learned, over many cases and many years, that every hour mattered, and most of them were already gone. He was in Whitmore Gallagher's conference room by 2 p.m. He read Sasha's 42 pages without speaking. He asked 4 questions. She answered them. He read the forensic report twice. Then he looked at Sasha across the table, and for the first time since Tuesday's archive floor, she felt something other than urgency and fear. She felt recognized. "How long have you been an attorney?" Whitfield asked. 11 months. He nodded slowly. "My best investigator has been doing this work for 9 years, and she would have been proud to find this. How long did it take you?" 3 hours in the archive, 42 hours to build the file." Whitfield looked at Colby. "Your associate is going to be on every front page in Georgia by the end of the week." Colby said nothing. Whitfield looked back at Sasha. "Marcus Harlow has a sister in Macon. Her name is Ruth Ann. She writes him every week. She has never missed a week in 22 years. He paused. "I need you to be the person who calls her." Sasha had not expected that. "Me? You found it. You should be the one to tell her." Sasha sat with that for a moment. She thought about Ruth Ann Harlow writing a letter every week for 22 years to a brother in Valdosta, sealing the envelope, putting on the stamp, putting her hope in an envelope, and trusting the mail to carry it, because she had nothing else to give him. "Yes," Sasha said. "I'll call her." She called Ruth Ann from the small conference room down the hall at 4:15 p.m. The phone rang 3 times. A woman answered with the careful voice of someone who has answered unexpected calls before and learned to brace. "Miss Harlow, my name is Sasha Drummond. I'm an attorney in Atlanta. I need to talk to you about your brother." Ruth Ann was quiet for exactly 2 seconds. "Did something happen to him?" "No, ma'am. He's all right. I need to tell you something else." Sasha stopped. She had prepared words. The words were gone. "Ms. Harlow, I found something last week in the Fulton County Archive. Something that should have been in your brother's case file for 22 years. I think we can get him out." The silence on the other end of the line was not empty. It was full. It was the silence of 22 years and 8,030 letters and a woman who had never once put down the pen because she couldn't afford to. When Ruth Ann spoke, it was in a voice so small it barely fit through the phone. "Say that again, please." "The filing took 6 weeks. The Georgia Innocence Project moved with the swift, quiet efficiency of people who knew that every day they moved slowly was another day someone spent inside. Sasha worked her regular caseload during the day and the Harlow brief at night. She ate cereal. She slept 4 hours. She called her mother on Wednesdays. "You still eating?" "Mostly." "Sasha." "I'm eating, Mama." She was not entirely eating. She was surviving on coffee and the particular fuel of knowing that 42 pages of work were going to do something real in the world, which is a kind of nourishment most people go years without tasting. The day the brief was filed, Sasha sat in her car in the Whitmore-Gallagher parking garage for 10 minutes before going upstairs. She did not feel powerful. She felt 24 years old, alone in a car that had 120,000 miles on it, with an air freshener shaped like a pine tree that she had bought because her mother liked the smell. She felt the particular smallness of knowing that the thing you have made is finished, and now the world is going to decide what to do with it, and there is nothing left you can do except wait. She called her mother. "It's filed." Dorothea was quiet for a moment. "Then, your father used to say, when he finished a good piece of work, a chair or a cabinet, something that was going to last, he used to say it feels different after. When the making is done and the thing just exists." Sasha looked at the pine tree air freshener. "Does it feel different?" Dorothea asked. "Yes, ma'am," Sasha said. "It feels different." The Fulton County Superior Court granted an expedited hearing. The reason for the expediting was Marcus Harlow's age. He was 51. He had entered prison at 29, and the presiding judge, a woman named Honorable Carol Ashton, had reviewed Sasha's brief over a weekend and come back Monday morning with a look on her face that the clerk's office would later describe as the look of someone who had read something they could not unread. The hearing was on a Thursday. It was in Courtroom 4B. Richard Colby was there. Margaret Foss was there. James Whitfield was there. The Georgia AG's office sent 2 attorneys who sat in the back and said very little, which Sasha recognized as the body language of people who had already read the brief and knew they were on the wrong side of it. Marcus Harlow was brought in wearing a gray corrections transport suit. He was 51 years old, and he looked both older and younger than that. Older in the way his shoulders carried something, younger in the way his eyes moved around the courtroom, taking everything in quickly, like a man who had taught himself not to miss anything because missing things had already cost him too much. He sat down at the defense table. His attorney from the Innocence Project sat beside him. Sasha sat at the table's near edge. She was not leading the hearing. Whitfield's senior litigator, a woman named Patricia Okafor, was arguing, but Sasha had built the brief, and everyone in the room knew it. And when Marcus Harlow's eyes found her across the table, she did not look away. He looked at her for a moment. Then he nodded, once, the nod of a man who does not yet know what is going to happen, but has decided to trust the person who found what was lost. Judge Ashton did not waste the morning. She asked the AG's office if they intended to contest the authenticity of the exhibit. They said they did not. She asked if they intended to contest the chain of custody. They said they did not. She asked if they intended to contest the relevance of the forensic report to the original conviction. They paused. Patricia Okafor stood. She spoke for 7 minutes. When she sat down, the AG's second chair leaned over and whispered something to the first chair, and the first chair shook their head. They did not contest it. Judge Ashton looked at the document on the screen. She looked at the courtroom. She looked at Marcus Harlow. She took off her glasses and set them on her bench and rubbed the bridge of her nose for a moment, the way people do when they are carrying something very heavy and need to set it down briefly before picking it back up. Then she put her glasses back on. "The court finds," she said, "that the suppressed exhibit constitutes material exculpatory evidence under Brady. The court further finds that had this evidence been properly received and reviewed by the jury, a reasonable probability exists that the verdict would have been different." She paused. "The conviction of Marcus Theodore Harlow is vacated. He is to be released immediately." The courtroom did not erupt. It made the same sound that Killian Hall had made. That particular sound of hundreds of people understanding something at the same time, the slow wave of it moving from the front to the back like water. In the gallery, Ruth Ann Harlow pressed both hands over her mouth. She made no sound. She just sat with her hands over her mouth and her eyes closed and her shoulders shaking the way a person shakes when they have been holding something for 22 years and someone has finally told them they can put it down. At the defense table, Marcus Harlow sat completely still. His attorney put a hand on his arm. He did not move for a moment. Then he reached up with both hands and covered his face, and the courtroom gave him that. It gave him the privacy of looking away, of finding something else to study, of understanding that a man who had just been given back his life deserved one moment where no one watched. After, in the corridor outside 4B, Margaret Foss walked up to Sasha. She did not offer a handshake. She offered something better. She said, quietly, without preamble, "I should have picked up that photograph in the conference room. I should have looked at it myself." She paused. "I won't make that mistake again." Sasha looked at her. "Thank you," she said. Foss nodded. She walked away. Richard Colby was standing farther down the corridor, near the window that looked out over Pryor Street. He had his hands in his pockets again. He did not call Sasha over. She walked over anyway. 47 cases, he said without turning. The AG's office called me this morning. They're going to do a full audit of every Harlow citation. He paused. It's going to be a long year. Yes, sir. For the firm. For the state. For a lot of people who built careers on a precedent that was built on a missing exhibit. He turned and looked at her. Something in his face had changed, not softened. Richard Colby did not soften, but shifted. The way a room shifts when someone opens a window. "You are going to be a very significant attorney, Miss Drummond. I want to be on record as having said so before you are too important for it to count." He put out his hand. Sasha shook it. She walked back down the corridor. Whitfield was waiting near the elevator. Ruth Ann Harlow was with him, and Marcus was beside her, still in the transport suit, waiting for the paperwork that would let him change out of it forever. When he saw Sasha coming, he said something to Ruth Ann, and Ruth Ann stepped back, and Marcus walked over. He was a full head taller than she'd expected. His voice, when he spoke, was quiet and even, the voice of a man who had learned in a loud place to speak only when he was ready. "Miss Drummond," he said. "Mr. Harlow." He looked at her for a moment. "My sister tells me you made the call yourself. You didn't send someone else." "I found it," Sasha said. "It seemed right." He nodded. "I have a question." "Okay. How did you find it?" Sasha almost smiled. "It fell off a shelf." Marcus Harlow looked at her. Then he looked at the ceiling for a moment, the way people look when something has happened that is too large for straight ahead. "God's got a sense of humor," he said quietly, not bitter, wondering. That evening, Sasha sat on the edge of her bed in her apartment in Decatur with the yellow legal pad on her lap, the red pen uncapped. She did not write anything. She just sat with the pad on her lap and the pen in her hand and the window open, letting the September air in. She thought about the archive floor. She thought about the cereal over the sink at 2 a.m. She thought about Ruth Ann's hands over her mouth. She thought about Marcus looking at the ceiling. She thought about her mother, who had stood in a kitchen in Decatur every morning for 19 years making two daughters' lunches and telling them both the same thing, wearing the same scrubs, driving the same 12-year-old Honda, and never once, not once, stopped believing that the room they walked into would eventually be worth the walking. She thought about the shelf. The document had sat in the archive for 22 years, stamped, filed, waiting. It had not gone anywhere. It had not given up. It had simply waited for someone to walk past the right shelf at the right moment and be paying enough attention to look down. Sasha picked up her phone. She called her mother. "I know," Dorothea said before Sasha could speak. I watched the news. I've been watching since 3 o'clock. Her voice was the kind of full that doesn't leave room for words. Your father would have. I know, Mama. No, listen. Dorothea's voice steadied. I want to say this. Your father built things with his hands and then left. But you built something with what you had, and you stayed in the room. That is not a small thing. Sasha looked at the open window. The September air came in clean and cool, the way Atlanta air only comes in for about 3 weeks in the fall before the heat claims it back. It fell off a shelf, Sasha said. Nothing falls off a shelf by accident, Dorothea said. You were in the room. You were the right person in the right room at the right time, and you didn't walk past it. That's not luck. That's preparation meeting its moment. That is every morning I made your lunch. That is every night you stayed up. That is every door that did not open when you knocked, and you went and found the archive instead. Sasha sat with that for a while, with her mother's breathing on the other end of the line and the September air at the window, and the yellow legal pad with nothing on it and the red pen in her hand. Marcus Harlow was somewhere in Atlanta tonight, breathing outside air. Ruth Ann had driven from Macon. They were probably at a table somewhere with food in front of them, and maybe they weren't eating it. Maybe they were just sitting across from each other the way people sit when they have been given back something they thought was permanently gone. 22 years. 8,030 days. One document in the wrong folder in the county archive. One shelf that fell at the right moment in front of the right person who happened to be paying attention. If you know someone today who is being told they do not belong in the room they are standing in, share this with them. Put their name in the comments. And if you are that person, if you are the one they keep sending to the supply closet, keep passing over, keep telling to wait your turn and earn your right and know your place, then keep going. The archive is full of things that have been waiting for you specifically. Go find them. I keep thinking about that shelf. Not about the courtroom, not about the ruling, not even about the look on Richard Colby's face when he finally picked up that photograph. I keep thinking about a metal archive shelf in a Fulton County storage room and a folder that had been sitting in the wrong place for 22 years and the specific ordinary Tuesday when it fell. Didn't fall for just anyone. It fell in front of Sasha. And what I've been sitting with ever since is this. The document was always there. The truth was always there. It didn't appear because Sasha was smart enough or brave enough or lucky enough. It appeared because she was in the room. She was in the archive at all. She was the kind of person who, when something landed at her feet, looked down instead of stepping over it. That's not luck. That's what her mother had been building in her every single morning before school. That's what 22 years of twice as good actually produces. Not arrogance, not entitlement, but attention. The quiet, relentless habit of paying attention even when no one is watching and nothing seems to matter, and you are just pulling files for someone else's brief in a building you chose because the coffee shop was on the way. What Richard Colby had. 30 years of courtrooms, a portrait in the lobby, arguments before the Supreme Court. That is the kind of accomplishment that can, if you let it, teach you to stop looking. When you have already arrived, the archive seems beneath you. When you already know the answer, a question from the supply closet floor feels like an inconvenience. He had confused the cathedral with the truth inside it. He had spent so long maintaining the structure that he forgot to check whether the foundation was sound. Sasha had not arrived anywhere yet. That was her advantage. She did not know enough to assume. She did not have enough to lose by looking. She had 42 pages and a red pen and cereal over a sink at 2 a.m. and the stubborn, unreasonable conviction that a man in Valdosta deserves someone who would stay up. That is not just intelligence. That is the decision to let what is right be bigger than what is comfortable. Every hour she worked past midnight was a choice. Every page she numbered was a choice. The choice to be the kind of person who does not put the folder back on the shelf. Marcus Harlow spent 8,030 days waiting for that choice. I think about what it costs a person to write a letter every week for 22 years without knowing if it matters. Ruth Ann wrote anyway. Marcus waited without bitterness, or at least without letting bitterness be the last thing. Because a man who gives up stops hoping, and hoping is the only thing that kept the story alive long enough for Sasha to find it. What the three of them had: Sasha's willingness to stay, Marcus's refusal to stop believing, Ruth Ann's refusal to stop writing. That triangle is the whole lesson. None of it works without the others. Grit without integrity is just ambition. Integrity without the courage to act on it is just a feeling, and neither means anything if you walk past the shelf. The archive is full of things waiting to be found. The question is only whether you are the kind of person who walks in.